UFC 242 took place on September 7th in Abu Dhabi, where we saw Khbaib Nurmagomedov successfully defend his title for the second time, successfully defeating Dustin Poirier by a rear naked choke in the third round. We also saw a very technical battle between Edson Barboza versus Paul Felder, where the split decision was given to Paul Felder. The main card featured top UFC talent, where they all delivered dominant performances. Overall, the whole card delivered a fantastic show, where right now is time to determine where these fighters will go on from their victories and losses. There are certain matchups that make the most sense, which will help the winners and losers of this card progress in the rankings. So for this video, I will be talking about the 10 fights to make after UFC 242, Khabib vs Poirier. Khbaib Nurmagomedov vs Dustin Poirier. In the main event at UFC 242, Khbaib Nurmagomedov defeated Dustin Poirier by submission via a rear naked choke in the third round to retain his title. In the fight, Khabib was repeatedly able to secure the takedowns over the 3 rounds and had Dustin in many bad positions. At one point it looked like Dustin had a tight guillotine choke, but Khabib managed to escape and overwhelmed him with his grappling. In the third round he was able to secure the rear naked choke to get the victory. The only fight that makes the most sense for Khbaib Nurmagomedov right now is to face the former interim UFC lightweight champion Tony Ferguson next. Over the years, both fighters have been scheduled to face each other many times, but the fight never materialized. As of right now, there are no other options but Tony Ferguson to finally get his shot at fighting for the title. Tony Ferguson has the skill set to give Khabib many problems. He is very awkward with his strikes, where he is able to use his unorthodox movement to stun his opponents with various strikes. This was seen in his last fight against Donald Cerrone at UFC 238, where he landed a number of hard shots, bloodying him up. Tony Ferguson also possesses the skills to give Khabib trouble on the ground with his very dangerous submission skills. Tony Ferguson faced Kevin Lee at UFC 216, where he was able to sink in a tight triangle choke in the third round to get his hand raised. Tony Ferguson is currently on a 12-fight winning streak, and it's crazy to think that he's not had a shot at the champion. This is the next fight to make, and hopefully we get to see them face each other to determine who the best lightweight on the planet truly is. Another possible option for Khbaib Nurmagomedov is to face the former UFC lightweight and featherweight champion Conor McGregor in a rematch. Both fighters fought at UFC 229, where Khabib was able to dominate Conor McGregor with his wrestling and even dropped him with a crushing right hand in the second round. Conor McGregor did have success in the third round with his striking, but was forced to tap in the fourth round due to a neck crank. After the fight, Khabib would jump into the crowd and attack Dylan Dennis, whereas inside the octagon, Conor McGregor would get attacked by Khabib's team, where it was just chaos everywhere. Even though it wasn't a close fight, the brawl that happened after the fight has created interest for a rematch to happen. The build up to the fight was very intense, and the rivalry itself is alive today, where both fighters absolutely despise each other. UFC 229 would go on to break pay-per-view records, and it is still intriguing to see what both fighters would do different in the rematch. Both fighters are world class, and this fight is a great option for Khabib if Tony Ferguson is unable to take the fight. With Dustin Poirier losing to Khabib, the fight that makes the most sense for Dustin Poirier is to face the winner of Al Iaquinta vs Dan Hooker. Both fighters are scheduled to face each other at UFC 243, which will be a very interesting scrap to see. Starting off with Al Iaquinta, he has shown his toughness and heart in difficult situations, where he has been able to push through till the end of the fight. In his fight with Khbaib Nurmagomedov at UFC 223, he was taken down repeatedly many times and was put into very difficult positions, but he kept pushing till the end of the fight. Even in his last fight against Donald Cerrone at UFC Fight Now 151, Donald Cerrone had beaten him into a bloody pulp, but Al didn't give up and kept pushing. Al is overall a well-rounded fighter who possesses some serious power in his hands. If Al is able to win this fight, I believe a matchup with Dustin Poirier would be perfect, as both fighters like to keep the fight standing, where they'll definitely put on a great show for the fans. Dan Hooker has looked like a totally different fighter since moving up to the lightweight division. He has just finished his opponents in a very impressive manner. In his lightweight debut, he was able to knock out Ross Pearson with the vicious knee at UFC Final 110. He would next finish Mark Jacasey, Jim Miller and Gilbert Burns. He would next get a solid name in Edson Barboza at UFC on Fox 31. In the fight, Edson Barboza's lightning fast strikes would be too much, where he would get finished by TKO in the third round. Dan Hooker would come back against James Vick at UFC on ESPN4, where he would win the fight by knockout in the first round. If Dan Hooker is able to win this fight, I believe a matchup with Dustin Poirier would be complete fireworks, and they would definitely deliver a good show. Paul Felder vs Edson Barboza. In the co-main event, Paul Felder defeated Edson Barboza via split decision. The fight that makes the most sense for Paul Felder is to face Anthony Pettis next. Anthony Pettis had moved up to the welterweight division and had knocked out Stephen Thompson with a Superman punch at UFC Fight Now 148. He would next face Nate Diaz at UFC 241, where he would get overwhelmed by Nate Diaz's volume striking and would lose the fight by a unanimous decision. His coach Duke Rufus mentioned in an interview that Anthony Pettis would be returning back to the lightweight division when he's healthy to return. An opponent like Paul Felder is best to welcome him back to the division. Both fighters like to keep the fight standing on the feet and have racked up some devastating finishes under their belts. Even though both fighters train at the same gym, both fighters match up very well against each other, where it will be interesting to see who comes out on top. With Edson Barboza losing to Paul Felder in a very close fight, the fight that makes the most sense for him is to face Alexander Hernandez next. Alexander Hernandez burst into the UFC, knocking out ranked opponent Beneil Dariush on short notice at UFC 222. He would next go on to defeat Olivier Aubin-Mercier by unanimous decision at UFC on Fox 30, and was next given a big name in Donald Cerrone at UFC Final 143, where he would get outworked and finished in the second round by TKO. He last defeated Francisco Trinaldo by unanimous decision at UFC on ESPN4. Edson Barboza is known for his explosive striking skills and has stopped fighters in their tracks with devastating kicks. Both of their styles match up very well against each other, and it will be a great fight to see. Islam Makhachev vs Khbaib Ramos. For the rest of the main card, Islam Makhachev defeated Khbaib Ramos by unanimous decision. The fight that makes the most sense for him is to face Charles Oliveira next. Charles Oliveira has started to show his true potential since moving back up to the lightweight division. He has been able to pull off 5 submission victories in his recent lightweight run, where he has started to gain momentum in the division. He is currently on a 5-fight winning streak and last defeated Nick Lentz by TKO at UFC Final 152. Islam Makhachev is currently on a 6-fight winning streak, where both fighters fighting each other makes the most sense. Both fighters have a heavy background in grappling, where it will be a very interesting contest to see. With Khbaib Ramos losing to Islam Makhachev, the fight that makes the most sense for him is to face Olivier Aubin-Mercier. Olivier Aubin-Mercier is currently on a 3-fight losing streak and has struggled against fighters who have pressured him inside the octagon. It seems like he will be released if he doesn't win his next fight, where we can expect him to be motivated in his return. Khbaib Ramos has pulled off many submission victories in his MMA career, where his grappling style matches up very well with Olivier Aubin-Mercier. This is a great matchup for both fighters to get back on their winning ways. Curtis Blades vs Shamil Abdurakhimov. Curtis Blades defeated Shamil Abdurakhimov by TKO via elbows in the second round. The fight that makes the most sense for him is to face Junior Dos Santos next. Junior Dos Santos had been on a tear in his recent fights, where he had racked up wins over Blago Ivanov, Tai Tuivasa and Derek Lewis. In his last fight, he would face Francis Ngannou at UFC on ESPN3 and would lose the fight by TKO in the first round. Curtis Blades is 7-1 in his last 8 fights and deserves an opponent ranked above him. I believe Curtis Blades has the fighting style to give JDS a lot of trouble, and it seems like the most interesting fight to make next. With Shamil Abdurakhimov losing to Curtis Blades, the fight that makes the most sense for him is to face Alexei Oleinik next. Alexei Oleinik is known for his superb grappling ability and has pulled off his signature Ezekiel choke many times in his MMA career. He is currently on a 2-fight losing streak, where he's coming off losses to Alistair Overeem at UFC Final 149 and to Walt Harris at UFC and ESPN4. Shamil Abdurakhimov has a well-rounded skill set and definitely has the ability to give Alexei trouble. Both fighters are coming off losses, but it will be interesting to see who comes out on top. Carlos Diego Ferreira vs Mairbek Taisumov. And Carlos Diego Ferreira defeated Mairbek Taisumov by unanimous decision. The fight that makes the most sense for him is to face Gilbert Burns next. Gilbert Burns has looked very dominant in his recent performances, where he has used all of the tools he possesses to gain the victory. He is currently on a 3-fight winning streak and looks better than ever. Carlos Diego Ferreira is currently on a 5-fight winning streak and is steadily working his way up the lightweight ladder. Both fighters are high-level grapplers, where it will be interesting to see who comes out on top. With Mairbek Taisumov losing to Carlos Diego Ferreira, the fight that makes the most sense for him is to face Alexei Kuchenko next. Alexei Kuchenko came into the UFC with an undefeated record of 18-0. He would go on to defeat both Thiago Alves and Yushin Okami, both by unanimous decision, where he looked impressive in both fights. He would next face Gilbert Burns at UFC Final 156, where he would suffer his first professional defeat in his MMA career. Mairbek Taisumov, on the other hand, always brings it whenever he fights and has one-punch knockout power in his hands. Both fighters are coming off losses, and both of their styles match up very well against each other. It will be interesting to see who comes out on top. Here are some honourable mentions. Another possible option for Dustin Poirier could be to face Conor McGregor in a rematch next. Both fighters first fought at UFC 178, where Conor McGregor finished Dustin Poirier by TKO in the first round. The lead up to the fight was very interesting, as Conor McGregor took jabs at Dustin Poirier, where it was clear that he was in his head. Since that fight, both fighters have gone their different ways, where Conor McGregor would later become the UFC lightweight champion at UFC 205. Dustin Poirier would go up to the lightweight division later on as well, where we saw his true potential come out. He was able to rack up a number of serious finishes against some top names, and would finally earn his title shot. Both fighters are coming off losses to Khabib, and this could potentially be one of the biggest fights to make. With Conor McGregor saying that he wants to fight before the end of the year, this rematch makes the most sense to happen next, where it will be interesting to see who comes out on top. Overall, UFC 242 as a whole delivered an awesome card. Khbaib Nurmagomedov demonstrated how dominant his wrestling can be, and so there isn't a clear answer for it yet. Who do you guys think should face Khabib next? Tony Ferguson, Conor McGregor, or someone else? Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please make sure you hit that like button and make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell to be notified when we post videos. So that was my list of the 10 fights to make after UFC 242, Khabib vs Poirier. Let me know your honorable mentions in the comment section below. Also check out my last video where I talk about Khabib's opponents before and after, 5 times Khabib mauled his opponents, and my other video where I talk about the 10 UFC fighters who made join Bellator in 2019. I appreciate your support as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.